Virginia Hausiger and I present the news at the ABC in Canberra. Tonight's program is about a man I consider a Canberra treasure. Fred Smith is in the unlikely position of having not one but two separate international careers. But recently they converged spectacularly so in Afghanistan. And with Australian forces soon to depart, this is the timely story of a diplomat with a difference.
People see diplomats as sort of stuffed shirts drinking cocktails in Geneva and New York, and that is certainly part of the work. But we're also in some very gritty locations doing difficult work. You know, when a bomb goes off in Bali, we're going through the body bags. When someone gets kidnapped in the Philippines, we're negotiating their release.
Today we gather on the 44th anniversary of the Battle of Long Tan.
In Afghanistan, they wanted to hold a commemorative ceremony for Long Tan, but of course it's a bit hard to get a good bugle player that far downrange. And so the night before, the Sergeant Major came in and said, "Fred, you know how to play Last Post and Reveille on the harmonica?" I said, "Don't know, but I'll look it up." I looked it up on the internet and got the notes and played it the next morning on the harp at that ceremony. It was a nice thing to do. Doesn't sound too bad on the harmonica.
I would describe Fred as the singing diplomat. You know, he's a person who uses music as a tool to build relationships and partnerships.
The Australian government's secret weapon, Fred Smith. I'm sure Fred would like to hear that, but certainly it was probably an unintended masterstroke.
I'm working as a ethnomusicologist here in Bougainville province. I'm here to study the musical comedy tradition of the Taliban.
I can understand why diplomacy and music would seem like a wacky combination, but if you look at the individual, he's a wacky guy.
Well, I was just a boy 30. No one ever taught me to shoot straight.
It seems really weird, Fred, having two jobs. You meet him as this person who's a musician, and then you meet him as this person who's a diplomat. But when you listen to the stories he tells through his songs, you can understand why he makes a good diplomat.
In July 2009, I was the first Foreign Affairs officer to be sent to southern Afghanistan to work as a political advisor alongside our troops in Bougainville province.
Alrighty, good to go. Yeah, go.
As political advisors, we go out and about beyond the base to have meetings with people. Our job is to meet with people, build relationships, influence the situation on the ground, and you can't do that from the safety of the base. When we leave the base, we either go out in these big vehicle patrols or in these sort of foot patrols, and in either case we've always got 15 or 20 soldiers around with their guns facing outwards. You don't go out there without 15 or 20 of your closest friends.
Bedroom? Yeah, Napa. 1 year.
Well, I knew Fred was quite a good political advisor, a person who was willing to face the risks of going outside the wire to do his role. I also heard that he was also a bit of a musician, and he would use music as a way to relax and have the Afghan officials come into an environment where they could also relax. And that opened up communication. He used music to show that there's more to foreigners than just a military intervention or a Western way.
Very good, very good. Thank you very much.
Dad worked as a diplomat, so I grew up in lots of different places around the world. India, Israel, Philippines. When I was 3 years old, I spoke better Hindi than I spoke English.
I went on and became ambassador in China in the 90s and ambassador to Indonesia. Then I left there and was Secretary of the Defence Department.
I first started playing guitar when I was 9. I was watching a Robin Hood cartoon and saw Robin Hood shoot an arrow out of a lute, which got me intrigued in guitar, so I asked my parents to buy me a guitar.
As a kid, he was sort of often slightly offbeat. In an amusing way, would see things from a different angle other people saw them from, and I think that comes out in his music.
I've got a friend called Pauline Hanson, got a big warm heart like Charlie Manson, and most redheads I'll take a chance on. She just makes me want to keep my pants on.
He was really interested in comedy. In his early writing, the stories were kind of more about making people laugh and experiences of a 20-something-year-old.
I took the word of the dapper dog tracks, got a bit bored with her on the way back. She asked me to pull back on my trousers.
I got to say that going through uni, I had no real clear idea what I wanted to do. And my dad and all his mates were in the Foreign Affairs Service, so it was natural enough for me to follow into that line of work. I suppose if Dad had been an undertaker, I might have done the same.
He'd studied law and economics at university and had done well in it, but he seemed to emerge from law as some sort of mild anarchist and from economics as a sort of latter-day Marxist. And when he told me that he'd applied to join the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, I was frankly quite flabbergasted.
So I worked for a couple of years as a graduate recruit at DFAT, but around that time I was getting very distracted with the music.
Oh Lord Jesus, it ain't that hard to tell, and the angel of Birmingham will take you down to hell.
At first, when he was talking about perhaps working part-time, I was thinking, is that a career, really? It's a lot of fun when you're 28, 30, 32, but come 55, 60, what's in that for you? All your friends will have progressed beyond you, and you'll still be doing these two things.
The operation to put down the secessionist rebellion had a fiery start. Houses were set alight in a number of hamlets.
Ran out of money from the album, and this opportunity to work in Bougainville came up, and I thought that sounds very interesting. In late 1997, when the Bougainville crisis wrapped up, the Bougainvillians invited Australian and New Zealand government to send in a peace monitoring group on the condition that we come to the island unarmed. It was remarkable. It was the world's first unarmed peacekeeping group.
Time crisis come up, only cry. Blurs in Bougainville sky.
I was Fred's patrol commander in Bougainville. First time I saw Fred was when he got off the helicopter that dropped him off in the paddock just opposite our accommodation. Walked across the helipad with a backpack that was just too big for him and a handful of luggage and his guitar, of course. And first thought that pops into my mind is, oh, well, he can play guitar, so this should be entertaining.
Now, plenty other fella man Long Island belong you fella. He got worried long one of something by come up behind me fella Lucy Island.
And I was living in a mission team site in the southwest of the island in a burnt-out old supermarket, and we had the only light bulb in the village of Sirikatau. And so I set out playing music one night under that light bulb, and suddenly, 200 faces came out of the dark.
It was amazing, They were there at the fence and kept growing, and little kids cheering, and older people getting into it as well. It really was a concert, even though it was just an impromptu thing from Fred.
So I thought, okay, I should write some songs for these people. And so I wrote songs in Pidgin, mostly about the peace process, because that's what I was thinking about at the time, and that was their reality too.
TMC civilian monitor, Mr. Fred Smith from Australia.
It was a turning point for me because before that there'd always been a conflict between my music and my real job, and suddenly it was all one job. It was all helpful towards one set of goals.
Long 1989, one fella, big fella heavy didn't come up Long Island belong you fella and bugger up and we'll get us something.
And that was a gratifying discovery, and I kind of felt like I belonged and that all that I was good at was useful. And we set up a studio there and recorded a whole bunch of local artists and my songs. And the Army ended up distributing a cassette called Songs of Peace. 20,000 copies went around Bougainville Island. There was a song on this cassette called Emnau Bulmakau, which translates literally as Yes Indeed Cow. It meant nothing. but the people loved it, you know. And it got to the point where, you know, a peace monitor could drive through a village in a four-wheel drive and cry out the window, "Emno!" And the kids in the village would cry out, "Bulmako!" It became a way of breaking the ice and humanising us as weird foreigners in military uniforms.
People just call him Bulmako. When they saw him or they see him everywhere, they call him Bulmako. There goes Bulmako, there goes Bulmako. Hello, Mr. Bulmako.
Right now, it seems to be becoming a common phrase.
Hello, Bulmako!
Fred's music, from my point of view as a patrol commander at that time, was extremely important. I don't think that we would have enjoyed anywhere near the same success as a patrol that we did if we did not have Fred and his method of communicating.
I went to Arawa for the closing ceremony of the International Peace Monitoring Force with the Defence Minister and General Cosgrove, and there we saw him in practice. I thought there was something here. This was really worth doing. That's a dimension to the trade of diplomacy that is certainly worth developing.
In the end, it was a very successful mission. I mean, we went in there in late '97 into the midst of a very bitter civil war. And by the time we left, Bougainville had pretty much restored itself to normalcy. So after I got back from Bougainville in 2003, I started to take the music a bit more seriously. Since that time, I've released 7 or 8 albums, toured in the United States and Canada. It's about getting the sound settled and getting the strings and Graham settled into the band. So I worked as a full-time musician for 3 years in the US, and I think it was that experience that taught me that what I really needed was to have 2 strings to my bow. I found being a full-time musician a bit thin, not only financially, but experientially. I was very lucky to have a job in a place like the Foreign Affairs Department where I was able to do work that I loved and was interested in. So Monday morning I get up, I put on a bag of fruit and a tie, shoot off to the office, work there 3 or 4 days a week. Thursday night, Friday morning, I'm in a car or a plane off to a festival, folk club, play 2 or 3 gigs on the weekend.
You all know Fred. He's back on decompression leave from TK, and we thought that while he was...
In May 2009, it was decided that we needed diplomats to work in Uruzgan province alongside the Australian troops in Afghanistan. So I applied and won the position. So the valleys are the key thing, and when we look at the security situation, we look at it in terms of which valleys are we controlling.
I think that I was a little naive about what he was going into, and in a way that was my way of protecting myself. It's like the world went white. I mean, what are you going to think when your beloved tells you that you're going into a war, they're going into a war zone?
Obviously, when you hear the word Afghanistan, you think violence and danger, and you assume that it's going to be very dangerous there. On my first day there, really, I attended a memorial service, a ramp ceremony for a young soldier called Ben Renato, who was killed by an improvised landmine.
Benny paid the ultimate price, and his name and spirit will live on forever.
Diplomats work in a lot of difficult environments, and things happen in these environments. But this was certainly my first and most immediate encounter with this sort of violence and death. But, you know, it really got to me. These are very young guys in their prime, getting killed in very difficult and brutal circumstances. In the ring they call me Warlord, my mother calls me Paul. Eventually I ended up writing a song about what happened to Ben called Dust of Uruzgan.
I've been standing still for hours when I took a quick step back and kicked a small AP mine and everything went black. I woke up on the gurney, flat out on my back. I had to ask him 7 times just to get the facts. Did I live to tell his story?
You know, it's 7 minutes long, and I was pretty concerned about whether people could pay attention for that long, but there was this sort of stillness and quiet after I played it, and I was like, I've hit a nerve there.
I was on the west flank picket, propped there with Ben, there to keep a watchful eye out while the other blokes went in.
When I got back from Afghanistan, I remember one night we were playing at the Berwick Folk Club in the east of Melbourne, and I introduced this song, Dust of Uruzgan. I said, this is a song about a fellow called Ben Ronaldo who grew up in these parts, I understand. And then a woman towards the back of the room called out, "He's my son." And of course, you know, I nearly fell off the stage.
You see, the mine was linked by a dead cord to a big charge laid by hand, hidden under Benny on the dust of Uruzgan.
And I don't know who went whiter, him or me. But yeah, and I said, don't worry, I love the song. It was fantastic to hear the song.
Benny's dead and buried underneath Australian sand, but his spirit's out there wandering through the dust. Through the dust of Uruzgan.
You know, it explained to you in layman's terms what happened, even though it's hard to hear. You understood what happened. It felt like you were there. And as a mother, all you keep asking yourself all the time is why? Why did it happen? Why did it happen? And in a way, the song sort of helped me understand what happened on the day.
Day to day, I'll be conducting patrols with my section, providing security for engineers.
I look at it now that Fred's made Ben immortal in a way because he's put him into song. I played it at the cemetery and said, "This is about you, Ben." And I sat there crying all the way through it. You should never outlive your kids, never.
Assalamualaikum, Zemanun Farid.
He's pretty unique and in some ways idiosyncratic, but you shouldn't underestimate what a professional diplomat he is.
In Australia we fight against the British too, but only on the cricket field.
He went in there as a one-person show, as the only diplomat on the ground. His instructions were pretty broad, which is that DFAT had never done something like this. He was to rock up at Kandahar airfield and somehow make his way to Tarankot, where the ADF forces were based, and carve out a role for himself. The judgments that Fred made about politics in Uruzgan, about the political strategy that we should pursue, have pretty much stood ever since.
I became the special envoy for Afghanistan and Pakistan in 2009. I was working on the Afghan issue in New York and Brussels and Washington and London and Bonn, and he was working on it down at the micro level in the Chora Valley, living in a tent. I learned a lot from him. There was a memorable scene where I arrived in a C-130. I had close personal protection. There were 4 armoured cars lined up for me and my colleagues, and at the back of the armoured car there was an old Toyota Corolla from which Fred emerged wearing a tweed jacket and a Cobra hat. Came over and we embraced there. It was a great family moment.
The northern summer of 2010 was a particularly brutal one in Uruzgan province. We lost about 10 soldiers in 2 months, and it started with a couple of sappers, combat engineers, who were killed by an improvised explosive device. There was a memorial service for them, and I was very affected by that.
They were exceptional soldiers and exceptional men. dedicated, courageous and committed to their job, always at the front leading the way.
Lord God Almighty, we pray for all of Jacob and Darren's mates.
It is an event that the whole battle group experiences and feels, and you reel from it. He was a first-hand witness to that shock and experience that we face, and he wrote a beautiful song.
We stood in the sun, slouch hat and gun, as two caskets passed us by.
I think it's his best song, actually, and I think he's actually told people about a part of being a soldier or a part of being on operations that rarely people would be exposed to. A Sapper's Lullaby is a song that resonates so strongly with everybody, I think, who served in Afghanistan.
So soldiers, sing me your Sapper's lullaby. You give it your all, knowing if you should fall.
We actually had a concert scheduled for that weekend, and I taught the guys how to sing it, and it was quite a thing, you know. I mean, I could see the guys' mates who came back in from the patrol base at the back of the room, and they were watching me sing this song. It was, you know, yeah.
These young engineers, his job is to clear the road so we may pass.
And when Fred sings that song about the ramp ceremony and the farewell to those two young men, I don't think there's a dry eye in the house.
They're always out front, and when they bear the brunt, man, it happens fast.
I think a real strength of Fred's music and the way he writes his songs is that he's actually experienced a lot of what he's writing about. Now, he's actually walked in the same footsteps of those soldiers he's writing about. Now, he ate, he slept, he bathed, he worked, he lived with them. And when soldiers died, he mourned with them.
Our first introduction to Fred was the first Anzac service after Jake was killed. He played the Sapper's Lullaby.
Snowy Moreland was just 21, way too young to die.
I said, you wrote about my son, and then he actually apologised for playing it. I said, no. I said, don't apologise. I said, I always crash and burn when it's played. Probably about 110% of the time I'll always tear up.
So soldiers, sing me your Sapper's lullaby.
Fred to me is a wonderful ambassador for the boys. I play it to remind me of what Jacob and Darren sacrificed, and any other soldier that gave their life.
You give it your all, knowing if you should fall, that all good things must
I think many people who've served on operations in Afghanistan and have witnessed such terrible things like to express that, find ways of expressing what they've seen. Fred does that through his music.
I'm just really grateful that through his music, I think it actually really helps him to process it rather than squashing it away somewhere where it makes you sick and it makes you frightened and it makes you depressed and angry.
Sometimes before I go to sleep at night, I think of you.
Going to Afghanistan and working in that environment obviously changed what I wrote about. You know, because I was playing comedy and drinking songs in pubs and things, and I said, well, you know, it's fun, but is it really that important? I think, you know, the sort of writing I've been doing in Afghanistan and seeing that the way it affects people's lives has given me a bit of licence to take my own art a bit more seriously.
Everything Fred did in terms of his ability as a songwriter was valuable from a diplomatic point of view.
I know this is a very difficult dream to achieve, but many men have died.
One of the skills as a diplomat in a place like Uruzgan is to be able to make sense of chaos and to tell a story. And Fred's ability to do so as a songwriter really made him better able to do so as a diplomat.
For a commanding officer, for a military person, it's something you want to use. It's a tool that you can see can provide you another inroad into gaining the trust of the population.
Underneath these northern stars, picking on a mate's guitar, with the breeze from Kandahar blowing soft and warm.
Right now, Australian troops in Uruzgan were now drawing down, bringing the base in, contracting, packing up and leaving. And I think we haven't done too badly. For all its faults, has really turned the lights on in Afghanistan. What happens from here on in is up to them.
Let them do it all themselves, now let's go home.
I've developed a real affection for the place, and I think I'm really going to miss working in Uruzgan.
Quite to our surprise, we discovered that we were pregnant about, I guess it's almost 10 weeks ago now. I'm hoping that the next great adventure won't be quite so dangerous.
So I get the feeling that I won't be going into any conflict zones for the next little while.
I don't know how I'm gonna fit back home. Been out here now so long, this is what I know.
So Australians will be gone from Uruzgan province soon, but Fred's songs will live forever.
There's a nice symmetry to it as well, that Fred was the first Australian diplomat to go into Uruzgan, and he'll be the last to leave.
This war is ending, now I'm going home.
I suppose you blokes will have inferred from the size of my biceps that I'm a thinking man. I've been living with the military for 6 months, and I've done a bit of thinking about you blokes. You people, an organisation of professional arse kickers, are here to persuade former and wannabe arse kickers that arse kicking is just not on.